Today, I am joined by Miss Lorrie Gray, one of the top female life coaches that there are, and I am super excited to have her because as we were just talking previously, her story is one of best way to put it is it's almost paradoxical how you were bedridden for such a long time, but came out of it. And now I see this bubbly person. And when you even told me that, I can't even fathom you being there, because looking at you now, you just look so bubbly, energized, and amazing. So number one, that is inspiring. And I just want to thank you so much to start off for being here with us. And I just want to jump right into it with having you tell us a little bit about who you are, your story, and how you came to be one of the top life coach. I mean, that is sick. So if you could just share a little bit for us, that'll be really exciting.
I am so happy to be here and happy to share my story. I said, it's so interesting to be asked to share your story, because it's there's so much of it. It's like, which part would you like to hear? Okay, so we'll give overview and then you can tell me what you want to hear more about. But yeah, so I grew up in middle of nowhere, Midwest, US. I joke that my childhood was like a little house on the prairie, where in the morning I literally before school went and collected eggs from the chickens and milked the goats. Okay, it was like that. But I joke, I'm like, if
You
there's
were really
ever
in the middle of nowhere.
we really were, and I'm like, it was a half an hour to a stoplight, my friend. And so I just joke. I'm like, if there ever really is a zombie apocalypse, I'm gonna make it. Like, it's all good. And then, so I have been, and we could talk about my childhood. I had a, typically dysfunctional childhood, with all those things, and, which influenced belief systems and whatnot. But I have been sort of progressively for my entire life sort of moving further west. So we started in the Midwest with this sort of upbringing, and then I moved to St. Louis, and that is where I met my husband. He is fantastic. And then together we moved further west to Denver. And in Denver, we were actually part of a humanitarian aid organization. So I spent my early 20s traveling. I have rebuilt bombed out playgrounds in Sarajevo. I've worked at orphanages in Haiti. In Haiti, I've done different stuff in Romania. We've been all over. So did that sort of stuff. And it was really fulfilling and really fantastic. And so even there, I wasn't coaching then, but I mentored our staff. I did small groups. Like, I've always just enjoyed talking to people and helping people, and would meet with people for coffee like every day, like every day of the week. I had a coffee date scheduled with somebody. I just like to talk to people, and I like to hear their stories and ask questions and encourage them. Anyway, so we were doing that, and that was fantastic. Had our first daughter while we were there. And then about halfway through my pregnancy with my second daughter, I joke, my body literally fell apart. It took a long time to get a diagnosis, but the punchline is, turns out I have this condition called Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. It is genetic, and looking back, I'm like, oh, that's all that weird stuff that happened in my childhood that I didn't know what was. But we were very much like a suck it up and play, tape it and play kind of people. And I was an athlete, and I'm like, you know what, sometimes stuff hurts and you just push through and you do the things. And so I just didn't know that all the pain and all the stuff I experienced wasn't normal. But yeah, so I have this condition. It is a connective tissue disorder. There's a bunch of subtypes, but I have the type that affects my joints, which basically means that my joints dislocate very easily. So carrying a baby, and I was a little bit less active, right? Like, I'm a mom, I'm not doing sports, I'm not doing all the things. And my connective tissue basically failed. And my, starting with my pelvis and then going to all the other parts of my body. And so I spent one entire year completely bedbound, unable to walk. It was in a bed on my side with my legs tied together, not able to even stand up. So that was for a solid year. And then we started the recovery process. They thought it was going to be quick. It was not quick. And it started with, hey, you can try to stand up for 5 minutes a day. And we started there. And this is, at this point we have a toddler and a newborn. So we could have a whole separate discussion on the fact that my husband is the most amazing person on the planet, as he took care of all of us. but we started the recovery process, and then as we went, and then I wasn't getting better. So it was like several years in where they were like, there is something really wrong here. All the doctors, all the treatments, all the everything, to finally get this diagnosis of, hey, so you've got this condition, it's permanent and it's degenerative. And so by that point though, I wasn't even functional at the time. Like I woke up, if you're familiar with the pain scale, like 0 to 10, I was waking up at an 8. Like waking up, I'm at an 8. Like I get myself to the bathroom and back and I'm at a 10. And they're like, hey, it's going to get worse and not better. I'm like, I don't understand how that's possible. Like, I don't even know what degenerative would look like for that. Anyway, so it was, I'll go ahead and say like that started in 2009 is when I first became like bedbound. I'd say the next decade was pretty rough, but I spent 5 years pretty much bedbound, having to use a wheelchair to get around. And I was a great patient. I'm just going to like say, like I did, like if I wasn't one of those people that they said, do your physical therapy and I didn't do it. I did it. I am that person. I am ambitious. I am dedicated. I am type A. I am scheduled. So if they said, do this thing 6 times a day, I did it. Go to this doctor. I did it. Pay 25 grand out of pocket for this treatment. It might help. We did it, right? Like we did everything to the letter. But I wasn't getting better. I was getting worse. And suddenly I'm developing all of these secondary conditions. And then it's like, here's a medication, here's this, anyway. And there just reached a point where I'm like, there has to be something else. There has to be a different way. There's got to be something out there. And I'm just one of those people. I'm like, nope, there has to be hope. And I'm not giving up until I figure this out. And so that's what sort of started, as much as I'd always loved to help people and talk to people, that's what really started this sort of like deeper dive into all the things healing. It started out with the physical stuff. It started out with learning about diet change and inflammation and what I could do in my physical body. Some of it in that initial phase was just pure stubbornness, where I'm like, I had 2 kids. I'm like, once a day, I'm going to get myself down these stairs and outside so my kids can play in the yard. I don't care how long it takes me. And I did that until I could do it. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to get down the stairs and I'm going to go 10 steps. I'm going to get down the stairs and I'm going to go 15 steps. I'm going to go to the first house. I'm going to go to the second house. And I was just honestly just kind of stubborn, pushing through all of these things. But it's interesting, once you start going down that path, I realized like there was so much more going on. I joke, I kind of went down like the healing, like well-being rabbit hole. And then that's when I realized like there was so much else going on. It wasn't just my body that wasn't healthy. Like my view of myself wasn't healthy. And I realized, I'm like, how in the world is my body supposed to get better if I'm like sending hate at it all the time, and hate towards myself? And all of these things just started to surface. Anyway, so I just started going. I just kept going. It's like I got out of the wheelchair and people were really impressed. But I still, to this day, people are so impressed that I was in a wheelchair and now I'm not. But I'm more impressed with the change that took place in my own mind and how I think about myself and how I talk to myself and how I show up in the world. But yeah, so I went through that process. And when you're in a wheelchair and then you're not, people get curious about what you did, how you did it. And so I start, and then also just meeting people who, I still have this condition. I still have pain every day. I still have limited energy. I still have limitations. I think I'm probably still qualify as disabled. I don't feel that emotionally, but it's true on a physical level. And kind of like you said, people are like, but you're happy. Like you don't seem to hate your life. I'm like, no, I don't. And so I honestly just started getting so many questions of, can you help me? Could you help me with this? Can I give you my friend's number? And the real big thing for like, how did I become a coach, is I just said yes. I'm like, yeah, I think I can do that. And it was just this very, very natural step for me to take everything that I've been through. And now I get to take all of it and I get to use it to help other people. And I seriously wake up every day and I'm like, is this allowed? Is this real life? Like, and then people pay me for it. And I'm like, what? Like, I get to show up, and just talk to people and hear their stories and get to help. And then they also send me money. I'm like, I'm blown away with my life on like a regular basis. Anyway, so at this point, I'm still getting better. I still keep improving. It's very slow at this point. I do still have a lot of limitations, but I've crafted a life that is beyond anything I could have ever imagined. whether in the middle of my disability or not. It's just the best. And then I get to do fun things like this, like meet you and talk about it. So
Yeah.
thanks for
And
having me.
Lorrie, where do I even begin? Wow.
Oh my gosh, sorry, that was a lot.
Wow. Wow. That was deep. That was a lot of stuff. But I'd like to start, I think, towards the beginning when you were talking about growing up 30 minutes from a stoplight and how that kind of influenced some of your beliefs, whether that be cultural, personal, relational beliefs. So what did your belief system come to be from growing up in a town that, wow, I live in a rural area now, but still the nearest stoplight is like 5 minutes away.
Right.
So, wow. So what
Yeah.
what did it look like for you?
Oh my goodness. I don't know if that part of the story is super happy, but we can go there. Yeah, I mean, this was like really, really small town. The entire population was 1,500 people. Okay, so really, really small. Um, I know that you shared that part of your story was, having some bullying and racism sort of stuff. And like, that's what I grew up with. I mean, it was, it was a very, very racist community. And it was, honestly, the culture of it and who the people were, like, I knew instinctively that all humans were equal and had value. And I was in a culture that did not believe that. So there were a lot of negatives. And I think I was maybe 10 whenever the concept of like leaving home became presented to me. And I was like, ooh, when can we do that? How soon can we do that? Because I kind of knew that wasn't for me. And yet at the same time, there were also parts of, I think there's a measure of self-sufficiency that comes from growing up on a farm, and a measure of like physical and mental strength for some of those things. And so, looking back, like now I can look at my childhood and I can appreciate a lot of those things. But I also learned a lot of what I didn't want and what I didn't want to be a part of. And I knew for me, I wanted to be with people who were open and were kind and could see the value in other people. And so I did my best to try to create change where I was at, and then at some point you recognize not everybody wants to change, and so picked up and went and found my people. And that was great for me, because I do think I spent a lot of my childhood feeling like I didn't fit in. I didn't feel like I fit in with my family. I didn't feel like I fit in with the town. And on the one hand, I think most people have that experience to a certain extent, and it's not always true. Um, but it did lead me to go find my people. And I remember just even like getting to college and realizing how big the world was and how many other people were out there. And it's just been such a privilege to get to meet so many people, and and find my tribe like all over the world of people who really resonate with what I believe and what I think about the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it gives you a unique perspective growing up in such an environment where now, as you shared, you live on the West Coast and more of what seems to be, to me, you just said downtown Los Angeles, you just grew
Downtown
from,
Los Angeles, yeah.
which is the complete opposite of
Complete
what
opposite.
you grew up in. But now I feel like probably presents you what you're probably more equipped to understand people from both cultures, being that you once grew up in that rural as hell part of the woods. And I think that's
No, you're so right on that, and even looking at, that is one thing I have to appreciate, because, I do not want to get into politics, by the way, but our country is very much divided right now, right? Between, you know, urban cities and rural America. And the funny thing is I look at both of them, and I don't have an us them mentality, because I'm like, these aren't some like nameless, faceless people. I'm like, it's my family, it's my people. Like, I know them, and I know that they're good people, and I have people on both sides of it. And so it is fun. Like, I feel like I really can understand both cultures and both, perspectives and what that looks like. And, and I love, though, that in Los Angeles, we go, on any random trip to the grocery store, that my kids are likely to hear 3 or 4 different languages spoken. And that was a value of mine, and that was something that was important to me, because again, we used to travel internationally. I actually didn't even think I would raise my kids in the States. I thought I would raise them abroad. And so I'm like, well, if you're going to be in the States, I'm like, Los Angeles, like, talk about a place to really get to experience cultures and diversity and openness and acceptance. And that was important to me, for my kids. But now it's like, hey, now we're going to take this trip around the country. I don't know if we mentioned this already. I told you before the podcast, but now my family we're doing this year-long road trip around the country. And I'm actually very excited to get to show them different parts of the country. And it is fun because I'm like, no, they're all my people. And I agree with some of them on some things and some things not, but they all just feel like my people.
Right. It's like you have one big family around the country. It's beautiful. No matter where you go, you got a culture that you can identify with, which I think is unique to you as an individual. Now, I wanted to touch a little bit because this has played a profound impact on my life, and it was the aspect of the service that you've done and the humanitarian work that you've done, because it's impacted me on so many different levels. Yes, I got some fulfillment in my own heart from doing that, because the gratitude and just the impact you see that you're having right in front of your eyes, there's no better feeling than that. And of course, there is the direct interaction with people from those countries, or in my case, I haven't been to other countries, but states, and that's priceless as well, because you see the exchange and how impactful words are, just words, never mind what you did in these other countries, which is amazing. But I'm curious as to how this really influenced you now in your coaching days. What can you identify that all of that service really did for you as you progressed throughout your life?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. So it is interesting. I think, as I look at all the travel and the people I met and what we did, it's like, okay, how has that changed who I am today? I think maybe the biggest thing is that it's helped me not be so quick to judge. One of the things I spend a lot of time with my clients doing, and it's like the most basic thing I bring them back to all the time, is that there's a difference between objective facts that exist in the world and our thoughts and interpretations about those facts. And I think most human conflict comes from not being able to tell the difference between the two. We tend to have a thought about something and we really think that we're right. And all getting to travel around to all these different countries, it just helped me understand that like there's not this like right way to do life. Like I got to see different cultures and different interactions, everything from like what's considered appropriate in terms of table manners to how to respond to like social engagement, and some of it I didn't love. Like we had dinner with a family in Sarajevo, and it was part of the culture where it was like they ate nothing so we could eat double, and I hated that. Like that was like one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life, like for sure. And at the same time, like there was just this ability to meet real people and like see the beauty in the differences. And so it's funny, and now I go back to the Midwest, and they're very sure that the way that they do things in the Midwest is the only way, and it is the right way. And I just don't buy into all of that, and I don't buy into it with my clients, where I'm like, nope, there's facts, and then there's your narrative, and one we can change and one we can't, and we get super clear on that. So I think that's influenced the most how I look at the world. But just just those experiences overall, it was, I think I agree with you, like it's helped make me so grateful for what I have. And some of it I didn't know what to do with. I remember the first time when I went to Haiti, and as I was in Haiti, like I had not seen poverty on that level. It's one thing to hear about it, it's another to experience it. I sat with an infant while it died of malnutrition, because by the time it got to the center, like it was too late. And I came home, I had no idea what to do with all of that. I'm like, do I sell all of my stuff? Right? Like just need to get rid of all of it. Like maybe that's the solution. Right. And I think I really had to face, like at an early age, like what do we do with the fact that it's not fair, and like that some of us are privileged, and like what does that look like? And I think I got to see that like early on, and then make a decision about who I wanted to be in the world when I was still quite young. And I've always kept all of that with me for sure.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful how you develop. I keep mentioning the word perspective, but you have such a unique experience in which you have been able to develop these different perspectives. And I've always found it so interesting how I could learn the most from those who have the least. Because in all of my experience, whether it be a homeless guy on the corner that I've taken to Dunkin' Donuts and had a half hour long conversation with, I've learned more from people that have nothing than I have from people that have everything. But of course, you could learn from both. But just the fact that there is so much to be learned and from listening to their story and what they've gone through. And that leads me, Lorrie, to my next point. And that is the fact that I believe that a fundamental problem, maybe one can say, that leads to our own of feeling not worthy, of feeling like we're not good enough, like the future isn't bright, is the fact that not many of us listen to our own story,
Mm.
that we're not looking at who we are as individuals. And how I break it down is I actually believe that there's three parts to our story. The one that we tell the outside world about who we are, or the story that we put on social media, and whatever, or what we tell to people directly, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's the story that we tell ourselves about who we are, or the internal dialogues about, man, am I really smart enough? Or like I was telling you before we started, man, I just don't feel like I'm accepted. I'm not desirable. I'm not attracted, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's a story that we want to tell ourselves about who we are, or the person that we want to become. But to me, and this is my way of looking at it, I feel like a lot of us live the parts of our story in direct contradiction with one another. To the world, we say we're one person, but to ourselves, we say that we're this person that isn't good enough a lot of the time. But then we want to become this person who achieved all of this. So I'm curious to hear your take on that. And having worked with a lot of clients, how does one begin to examine their narrative? Because I think that is the starting point of self-discovery and the journey of personal growth.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I actually like the way that you put that. It reminds me of, oh, I'm going to say it wrong. You'll have to look it up. I think it's called the Johari window or something. But it's this way of looking at, like, there's a part of ourself that's like known to us and known to the world, and there's a part of ourself that's like known to the world but kind of
Oh, that's
hidden to
interesting.
us. And
Really?
there's a part of us that like we know but the world doesn't know, and then there's a part that like we don't know and the world doesn't know. Anyways, it's a very fascinating little concept. But yeah, but it's sort of the same sort of thing. Is like there are these different parts of it. And I don't necessarily say this whenever I talk to people about what I do as a coach, but I guess I'm just going to tell you guys. But a huge part of what I'm doing whenever I'm talking to people is like they're showing up and they're telling me the story, right? And they're telling me the surface stuff, and we're asking questions. But a lot of coaching it's kind of surface level. It's like, here's a problem, and then let's solve it. Let's like go through that. I'm that person where I'm like, okay, well, yeah, but let's not just willpower through some actions. Let's understand why we're in inaction in the first place. Like, can we go a layer deeper behind what's happening? And can we look at, why we're doing what we're doing, why we're not doing what we're doing? And as much as we would all like to think that we're logical, that's usually emotions based. And I'm a highly logical person. So I'm like, I love finding people who are like engineers and type A's and like really abstract thinkers. And then we sit around and talk about emotions all day. It's fascinating. But then I'm always looking to even go like to take all of that information and get a layer deeper. Because what I found is that in the midst of these stories, these narratives, there's typically one, and sometimes more than one, but usually one really key core belief that we have about ourselves, and usually a painful one. And it develops somewhere in childhood. And, it's some version of, I'm not good enough, I'm broken, I'm a bad person, there's something wrong with me, I'm lacking something, right? And I, as a coach, I'm always wanting to get down to like, what is the core painful thought in this narrative? And can we identify that? Because sometimes people come to me, and we talked about like the fact that I coach on so many different things, and people, they come to me because they think they have 85 different things going on. But what I like to show them is really there is this one core belief about themselves. And we look at how it formed, and then we look at how the thing is, when we believe that we're not good enough, we tend to create evidence for it ourselves. We go do the kinds of things that help us believe it more, and we don't realize we're doing it. We're doing it all unintentionally. But we look, it's like, no, this is my pile of evidence that I'm not good enough. This is my pile of evidence that I'm lacking. What I like to do is go back and empower people to see that the only reason they did those things or didn't do those things was because they were operating from that belief about themselves. And we try to look at it differently, and then the key is like helping my clients shift that, come to a healthy belief about themselves. But even then, like, we have to kind of relearn how we do stuff. You're talking here about achievement. And now, I don't know if you've seen this, but what I find is like people talk about like overachieving and underachieving, right? Or people are like, do a lot or, don't do a whole lot. I don't like to talk about that. I actually think people who like overachieve or underachieve are both coming from the same place of self-doubt and insecurity. There's some sort of belief of like, I'm not good enough, I'm lacking something, there's something wrong with me. And either they try to fix it by going and proving their worth, right? By trying to like achieve and do enough and be successful enough and make enough money and get the accolades to try to prove they're good enough, or they do nothing at all to like prove it right. And so a huge part of what I do with clients, once we identify this belief, is to shift it and then to move into that place of like, no, we're already good enough. Like, we're whole and complete and valuable and worthy just by existing. And now what does it look like to achieve things from a healthy place of self-worth? And like, sometimes it comes because people are like, well, if I'm already good enough, then what's the point? I'm like, exactly. We go do it because it's fun. We go do it because we want to. We go do it because it's who we're meant to be, because it's what we're passionate about, because it's what we're called to do in the world, knowing already that we're fine. Like, we're fine as people, and that's settled. And when that's settled and that's not part of the equation, I think it's what opens it up for us to be able to go do whatever it is we want to do in the world in this really healthy and fantastic way. So yeah, but anyway, so I don't think that really answered the question that you asked, but hopefully something in there was valuable.
Of course. No, I think it was spot on. And that would lead me to another question that even I have, like, sometimes when people ask me this, I'm not sure how to respond a lot of times. So I'd like your perspective on it. It's just, I'm in a job where I'm just not happy doing what I'm doing, but I have this salary and it keeps me afloat, but I know I'm not passionate about it. So how can I start to live a passionate life if I'm stuck in the work that is in complete contradiction to how I want to live my life or the way I want to live my life?
Yeah. Okay. So if I had somebody ask me that, we would do two parts of this. First part is, I always let people know it's not your job's job to make you happy. But we think that it is. And we think that we're not happy because of the job or the situation or the money. And then we're just going to change it, and then we're going to be happy. But what most people find is you can change all the externals all that you want, but happiness is an inside job. And I believe that people are about as happy as they choose to be. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't go change our job. I think a lot of people do need to be in different jobs. I think that a lot of us are, working for a paycheck whenever we're actually called to so much more. But I don't ever encourage anybody to change a job because they're unhappy. I'm like, figure out how to be happy and content and passionate where you are, and then change your job if you want to. Because it's more fun to do a job that we're passionate about than one that we're not. But I do also think, I have talked to some people though who they are in a place where they can't pay rent or buy food. They're like, yeah, but I need to follow my passions. I'm like, no, sometimes you need to go get a job and pay your bills. And then from that place, when you can eat and your basic needs are met, then go figure out what you're passionate about, right? Like, and so I always approach it from two different ways. But I think the biggest thing is that we are all convinced that it is the outside world that has us feel the way that we feel. And I call my clients to a level of ownership over their thought life and their emotional life that you don't see in the world very often. It's part of the reason why I'm good at what I do. My clients also sometimes get mad at me about it, right? Because we would like to just sit back and be able to blame it on the job, and switching jobs is so much easier than doing that internal work. But that's where the freedom is.
Yeah, I love that. The fact that you preach that personal ownership and accountability, because honestly, that's key. And a lot of us blame circumstances, environment for how we're feeling, what we're doing, and what we're achieving. And I think that it's key to turn that around. It seems like you probably believe with me the fact that we can create the future and the tomorrow that we want. We
Yeah.
can't control necessarily everything that happens around us, but we can control our perspective and our reaction to what happens in the outside world.
Exactly. No, exactly. I mean, and that's the thing, like, and looking at my life and like what I've experienced, I'm like, we're not going to be able to change everything in the outside world. We're going to be able to control ourselves. But it's interesting, like, as we do that, what we change is our experience of our reality. And that's been interesting because, even like, whenever I list for people like what I deal with physically, they cannot wrap their brain around the fact that I'm happy and enjoy my life. But that was not something that happened overnight. Like, it was learning the tools to be able to celebrate the beautiful things in my life without disregarding the things that were painful, and being able to really open myself up to the human experience and what it was, and be in acceptance of what was happening. And from that place, yeah, I've been able to create things. But at the same time, right now, if it was like, hey, do you want to go run a marathon? No, like, I don't know that running a marathon is in the cards for me. Like, maybe, but like probably not. And it's like, can I like positive think myself to the place of, not having this health issue? Like, maybe not. But that's getting into those specifics. But it's like, can I create an amazing life for myself where I'm fulfilled and passionate and like living in my zone of genius? Yeah, I really can. So I love that you say that, like the idea of, or what's that quote? The best way to predict the future is to create it. I totally believe that, but it doesn't mean that we can, if we strategize enough, suddenly we can control other people in the future, or the weather, or the environment, or whether there's like a global crisis. Bunch of stuff we can't control.
But control what you can control.
Yeah, we can always control
Right.
us in that situation. So I agree.
So,
I love it.
so in the whole talk of perspective, I'm curious as to, and especially when this first happened to you, and you started to be bedridden that first year, and I'm sitting here listening to you, and inside I'm like, holy moly, being bedridden. If I'm in bed for a day, I'm going crazy. On
Yeah.
top of that, having a husband and having children. So what
Mhm.
type of impact did this have, especially being bedridden entirely the first year, on things such as your self-worth, especially being a mother? Where I'm not sure how you grew up, but I grew up with my mother, yes, but also with an Italian grandmother. I'm half Panamanian, half Italian, but my grandmother was like Superwoman. She cooked,
Mhm.
she cleaned every day. She was just
Mhm.
active, active, active. And as I shared with you, it impacted my mother with her health issues, and she felt like, I'm just not a good mother.
Yep.
I'm just not. And now as a result, I have, she gets depressed, and I'll catch her. She'll be laying in bed for a week. What's wrong, Mom? Oh, nothing. But deep down inside, I know it's rooted in the fact that I'm not doing what a woman is supposed to do, or because that's how she grew up. All she saw was women who cooked, cleaned, and took care of their husband. So for her, that's exactly what she correlated it back to. And she wasn't doing that, so I'm not worthy. So
Yep.
what was your worth, and how did you view yourself, especially during those first stages of, oh man, this is actually my reality?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And like, I can just totally relate to what you're sharing with your mom. I'm like her and 99% of every other of all the women that I've met, especially the moms, right? No, yeah. So for me, and I was that person too, like I'm a high capacity, high achiever kind of person. Like, looking back, I know. And the interesting thing is, like, it's so interesting to understand it with hindsight. But what I know right now is I did so much because I was trying to prove that I was valuable. I was trying to prove that I had worth. And I think kind of like having to justify my existence, because I think somewhere deep down, I didn't think I was valuable. So it's like, if I do enough and do enough and do enough, like somehow I'm going to make it okay for me to exist. So I was very much there, and I'd also been an athlete too. So very, very active. Yeah. And then you get stuck in bed. And I think I realized too that I think I dealt with some measure of depression like a lot of my life, and it was just a outrun it, like, and I mean like literally outrun it, like get a project, go do a thing, like get active. And I never had to deal with any of it. Yeah, and then I'm sitting there laying in a bed as a person who had consistently found her worth in what she was able to do, and not only am I not able to contribute, I am just taking, literally taking from everyone around me, um, and negatively affecting people's lives. And like, And I didn't want to ask for help because you don't ask for help. That's not what you do. And I just couldn't function. So no, I will say it was bad and it was dark. And I definitely got to that place of like, I don't understand what the point is of being alive here. Like, I don't get it. And it was really bad. But at the same time, there was that moment of, kind of looking at it and being like, I have to figure this out. I have to work through it. And being the kind of person that I was, the kind of achiever that I was, at this point, I'm like, I think that if it had not gotten to that point, I mean, that level of extreme, like you are literally going to lay in this bed and not be able to do anything. I mean, and I was so brain foggy. I mean, I couldn't even read a book. I couldn't string two sentences together. I couldn't understand basic things. I couldn't have a conversation with people. Like nobody could even touch me. I was in so much pain. So nobody could sit by me. Nobody could touch me. I could barely interact with people. Okay. Literally no contribution. I honestly think if it had not gotten that bad, I don't know if I would have ever really understood my self-worth and value as a person unrelated to what I do. I don't know if I would have ever learned that lesson. And I think it was just sort of I've got some options here. Option one is I can keep thinking and keep believing what I'm doing, and I could see where that was leading. It felt like I was like being buried by teaspoons. And I'm like, I go down this route very much longer and I'm not ever going to come out of it. Or I can find a different way of looking at this. I can look at, I don't know where you are in faith, but like I was a person of faith and like believing that I was created and that I was a person that had value. And I'm like, or I can believe this thing that I have value just by existing. And I kind of tried them both on. I looked at them and I'm like, I'm just going all in on this. And I started to just make the choice to believe that. And again, it's hard to describe the entire process, but I feel like so much of it for me was just a choice. I'm like, I'm kind of at this like crossroads and what I'm doing isn't working. And of all the things that I went through, of all the things that were terrible, that and like really, really, really learning that my value and worth as a person is not linked to what I can accomplish in a lifetime or in a day. I don't know if anything has shifted how I show up in the world more than that. And I love talking to clients who think that their worth is based on what they do. And then, especially like new clients who don't know. And then, like, I explained to them that I was stuck in a bed for 5 years and did nothing at all. And like asking them if they think I was still valuable. And they're like, well, of course you were. I'm like, right. But if you don't get all the laundry done, you are not. Like, let's talk about how much sense that does not make. So I think if anything, like it's one of those things where I look back on, I'm like one of the hardest points, but also probably one of the most life-changing aspects.
100%. I would have to agree with that. And of course, my journey is nothing like yours in terms of that. But, going through my own trials and tribulations, what I found was that on the other side of that trial, that struggle and that tribulation was really the person that I was meant to become. But
Yes.
I feel like it, but on the other end of that, it's very easy to develop a self-image and a self-worth that enables you to quit very easily. And you don't come to see that person and you don't come to meet that person, become that person, and therefore have the contribution and the impact on the world and those you love as you should have.
Yes. Yeah. No, sorry, can I jump in? Like, I think you had more to say there, but that is so true. And that's like when I look at what I've been through, there was a lot of time where I'm like, I'm not grateful for this because this is really hard, but I'm grateful for these other things in my life. But looking back, I had this moment like not too long ago where I look at who I've become through that journey. And I'm like, I like who I am. Like, I like who I've become. And I don't know if I would have had this level of compassion or empathy or understanding for other people if I hadn't gone through what I'd gone through. And yeah, so it's interesting. Like I look back and I like who I became through this. And so like, and that doesn't necessarily mean like I'm glad that I had this terrible condition,
of course.
But it does change the perspective, but I see the same thing. Like I talk to a lot of people, and as I'm working with people and they're making big changes in their life, we're making the changes and we're working through the limiting beliefs that are holding them back. But one thing I learned pretty early in my coaching is that while they're doing that, we have to also sort of simultaneously be starting to get comfortable with this new person that we're becoming.
Mm.
Because becoming a new version of ourselves is uncomfortable and it's scary, and we've not met that person and we don't know who they are. We don't know if we like them. We think we like them, but I will see people, whether it's a weight loss journey or a different job or whatever, and they actually do the work and then they get out there and they're living this fantastic life that they want, and it's so uncomfortable. Because it's like they just shed their old skin and they're stepping into a new one, and they feel like they're like naked out in the world, this new version of themselves that they've not met. And so I agree, because as much as growth is fantastic and evolving is fantastic and becoming who we're meant to be and becoming the next best version of ourselves, however you want to say it, change is scary. Change is scary, like for all the people. And so I'm like, I think the more that we can start, and I have my clients like go to the future place where they're already
Mm-hmm.
there and get comfortable with who that new version of them is. So when they actually get there, they don't freak out and like
Right.
self-sabotage and go back to where they were, because that's what we do. It's like, oh man, this is like crazy. Let's go back to what we were doing before, where we were miserable, because at least it was comfortable. Right.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So then what role does gratitude play in your life?
Oh my
And then
goodness.
do you have any, I mean, maybe you do, maybe you don't, doesn't matter. But do you have any practices that whether that be reflection, whether that be journaling, whether that be X, Y, Z, what is your, and the reason I bring this up is because I feel like in order to develop a state of mind, being in a position that you were in, I'm sure that you probably found joy and happiness in things that to most people seem little or minuscule, because being stuck in a bed, you don't have the privileges that 99.9% of the world have, so therefore there's seemingly very little to make you happy. So
Mm-hmm.
what does the gratitude practice look like for you, and what are your thoughts on how that can impact someone's life on a positive level?
Oh man. No, that's such a great question. Yes, gratitude has been huge for me. And so, I mean, I don't know how many years ago this was, but yeah, but I started every day writing down 3 unique things that I was grateful for. And it wasn't that I couldn't repeat anything, but I made it a point to try to find new things. And if I was going to repeat something I'd been grateful for before, I had to give a different reason I was grateful for it. And so I really, over the course of years, trained my brain to look for things. And I think that's the thing. Like, and I've made a choice to be delighted by all the little things. Like, I'm delighted when I have a good cup of coffee, or, like right now I can see a hand knitted like dish rag that my friend made me, like in my brand colors. And I'm like, that is so fun. Like, I have the best people. And I just choose to get really like silly about those things. But I tell you what, and I tell this to my clients who have chronic health issues and people in those places. I'm like, clean water, friends, clean drinking water. Like, talk about things to be grateful for. And that was the thing, like as I started getting to the end of like the things I could think of to be grateful for, what I did was I started going room to room in my house. And I would walk into a room and I would just stand there. And sometimes that really was like using my walker to get there, sit there, whatever, and look around. And I'm like, what are all the things here that I can be grateful for? And I mean, seriously, indoor plumbing, what the what? Like I don't care if you're in a bed, like you turn on the faucet and hot water comes out. Like, what? Like, why are our minds not blown on like a daily basis by these things? Because I mean, honestly, like I'm thinking about like the level of health issues that I had. I'm like, put me in a different country, put me like not too many years back, and I don't think I would have made it, honestly. But I'm like, we have so many conveniences. And yeah, so anyway, so I just made it a point to like look for all the things around me. And even right now, I have to tell you, I've done this so much and I've trained my brain to this so much that it automatically looks for things to be grateful for, like on its own now. Like now it's just how I show up in the world. We have several gratitude. I have my personal gratitude practice. We have a gratitude practice as a family. We do, we do all the things. But I actually heard somebody recently, and they were talking about their life, and it wasn't in a coaching session. It was just like a friend, and they were like talking about how rough their life was. And I actually had that moment where like I'm feeling so guilty, like because of how amazing my life was for this like able-bodied person who was making like a ton of money, but like they were just spinning this narrative, and I like believed them. And then later I stepped back. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's hilarious. Okay, first off, and like that I have spent so much time being grateful for all the little things in my life that they genuinely do feel like they outweigh in spades, like the fact that like, yeah, maybe I might dislocate a hip and I can't walk for a day or two. I'm like, yeah, but when I do that, I have a cushy bed and we have money and I have a flexible career and I have clients that don't care. I have the best clients in the world, by the way. And like one thing happens that for most people would send them in this like spiral of negativity. And all it does for me is I'm like, yeah, that part sucks. But then look at these 25 things that in the midst of this are fantastic and that make this doable and achievable. Here's the other thing. I'm going a little preachiness here. Like the other thing, I'm like, I don't care how bad it is. I can always feel positive about myself in any situation. And I'm like, I look at this stuff, I'm like, who better than me to walk through this? Well, like, look at what I've learned. Like, I'm capable, I'm strong. Like, and that's the thing, like, it shows up. And I'm like, the thing itself may be negative, but I have cultivated such a strong belief in myself that like almost like the more terrible the situation is, the more capable and positive I feel about myself. Cause I'm like, I don't think there's anybody who's like more equipped to walk through this really well than me. And all it does is make me feel really good about who I am and how far I've come and how able I am to walk through it well, you know?
Yeah, that is, I mean, one of your gifts and something you've been able to develop, it seems, is that you can just take on this perspective of, number one, I'm grateful for the little things, which is huge because, as you said, it's enabled your mind to start to look for things to be grateful for, as opposed to most of us, where it's we start to look for things that only reinforce what we want to know or hear about
Exactly.
ourselves. And a lot of the times, our present self is predicated upon our old self. So therefore, we only look for things that reinforce the negatives about who we were in the past, but then show up in who we are now. So I
Yep.
love what you said there. That was great. And then also the second part, which I thought was interesting, and I never heard. I don't know if I've never heard. I probably never heard anyone put it that way. Was when you're in that situation, who better than me? And I think for me, for example, I'm getting ready to go to a specific training in a military. It's called Army Ranger School. And one of my friends, I'm so happy for him. He just sent me a text. He has like a break from it because of Christmas. He's lucky. I won't get that break. But anyways, it's like really in depth, a lot of time spent in the woods training and stuff. And it just, to me, it's like, what if not only me, but my fellow, brothers and sisters who are out there, what if we all told ourselves like, who better than me to go through this terrible situation? There is no one more equipped. And that's something I'm going to use 100% and start incorporating, because I think that just, instead of saying why me, it's like, man, why not me type of mentality, which is beautiful. So I thank you
Yes.
for that. That's pretty legit right
You're
there.
welcome. It's one of my favorites. I use it all the time. And yeah, it's one of those things, and this came from, the other thing that's a huge part for me besides gratitude is I do, as much as I'm a coach, I also every day, well, recently not so consistent. We've been traveling a lot, but for like years, every day I would sit down and I would do what I call self-coaching, where I look at like, what's the thing that's happening? What's my narrative? What's the story that I'm telling about it? And do I want to keep that? And I'm not about just like repeating like fluffy affirmations that I don't believe, but I'm like, what is something that is true that I could think about this that is better than the story that my brain is telling on its own? Because exactly what you said, like it's always confirmation bias. We're always looking for evidence of what we already believe. And our brain is always going to go down the most well-worn paths. And for whatever reason, for most of us, they often tend to be negative. And so every day, I would sit down and I would look at what is my brain doing when it's unattended? that's probably not helpful. Okay, so what do we want to do on purpose? And I would direct it to these things. And I spend time sitting and like looking at, what can I say here that is true and that I believe and that is positive and that is going to move me forward in life? And it's never sitting around asking why me. Um, and so I don't know, that's one of those things that I feel like offering new thoughts to my clients is one of the best things that I have learned to do, because I've done it for myself. So anyway, so that's the other part of it, that kind of thing, like recognizing I'm sitting over here saying, why me? I'm like, well, that is serving me none at all. Like, what is an alternative thought? And I just do that on a daily basis, looking at what's happening in my brain, directing it where I want to go, and practicing it.
Yeah, you just literally took the word that I was going to use. Practitioner. I think that's a great way to describe what I'm listening to and who I'm listening to right now. Not only do you coach others, but you're a practitioner, and you practice it on yourself. That is something that we can all take so much from, is asking those questions of, how is what I'm telling myself or what I'm saying out loud serving me? And if it's not serving me, how can I redirect that energy, because it is energy, towards a place that is serving me, and going from that negative state to that positive state. What was I just heard a quote, or I read a quote, there's no negative people, only negative states.
Yep.
Oh, it's
No, it's so true. And like, I love it whenever my clients come in and they're like, oh my goodness, this person is so negative. I just hate negative people. It's just so awful, like all the negativity in the world. And I'm like, hey, guess who's being negative now? Right? Or like, I had someone recently, they're like, oh my goodness, my mother-in-law, she is so judgmental. She is like this. And like, then went to like proceed to tell me their list of judgments. And I was like, hey girl, hey, like, you have that judgment that you think is so terrible, like you're doing it, right? And I'm like, we have to put more of what we want into the world. And then we can rail all day about the stuff that we don't want to see, but I'm like, we need to get clear on what do we want and how do we put more of that into the world.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And man, that's pretty funny about your client, but so many, it's so relatable to so many. I was just in the course I'm taking, I told you on NLP, that was one of the things that that the teacher was saying, is that we always look to throw stones at other people without looking at what we're putting out there ourselves, which is, it's crazy to think, but yet it's so true. And it makes me think, what if we are all capable, what if we all were more in tune of the power of our words and what we were saying?
Yes.
And I'm curious, law of attraction, all of this stuff, the movies, and it's always put out there. It's a phenomena that sometimes gets misinterpreted. Sometimes it's people think in their heads that it's this big thing when it's really not that big. Sometimes people think that it's just as easy as, I think something will come and then it will come, but some action has to go into it. So I'm curious, as before I switch to a different type of topic, is what is your take on the whole law of attraction deal, and how have you seen it play out in not only your life but your clients?
Okay, so I'm a very science-based person. And it doesn't mean, now what I'm very aware of is there's a lot of things that are very true that I don't understand. And there's a lot of stuff that may be scientific that I just don't get. So I don't disregard anything ever. I don't write things off. I like to think of myself as very open. But I admit, like, I like to operate in the realm of stuff that is provable. But one theory that I found very fascinating was the concept of quantum entanglement, that there is like actual proven research that when we actually have a connection with a person, that our thoughts and the energy that we put out into the world can be picked up and received by their brain over like massive amounts of space. The coolest one was they did this exercise where they had two people, they sit in these like isolated boxes, no sound, no light, no connection or whatever. They're completely separate, but they're just like trying to be connected to each other. And then they shone light in one person's eye, and that center in the other person's brain lit up. This is quantum entanglement. So there is science behind the fact that like if we put something out into the world energetically, that people that we have actual connection to in terms of quantum entanglement, that there can be some like receiving that happens. And so anyway, so I do think there is science to back it up. I do think it is a misunderstood concept and is often used similar to the way that personality profiles are used as a really solid, very evolved sounding reason to sit around and not take action. And so that's where I have some issues with it, where I'm like, I definitely think the best way to get stuff done is to go do it. But here's the way that I really break it down. I'm like, stuff happens in the world. Then we have a thought about it. And it is our thinking, it is our mind, that is what produces our emotional state. Now, when we're talking law of attraction, we're talking actually emotions here. People think it's repeating the sentence. It's not. It's emotions, and emotions are vibrations in our body, and we put them out into the world, and people can feel them. It's why you can walk into a room and be like, and you can just tell things are like super tense, and you don't even know what's happened. You didn't hear anything, but you can feel it. Or you can be around people that are like high stress, and you notice like you're feeling stressed because they're high stress, right? So we actually can do this. We experience these emotional states, but it's always what we feel that drives what we do. And, you know, if we're in a state of shame, it kind of leads to inaction. If we're in a state of like procrastination or overwhelm, we typically pull back and we don't get a lot done. You know, whereas if we feel motivated or inspired, we tend to show up and do things. So I more so than like, let's, you know, talk law of attraction, I always like to bring it down to like, what are we thinking? How does that feel on an emotional level? And when we feel that way, what does it lead us to do or not do? And then can we go back and look at the thought? We never argue with emotions. But, you know, but then at the same time, you know, knowing how it works, I have seen people, I've seen this over and over again, where as much as I don't teach law of attraction, I teach like thought management, I teach emotional management, I teach massive action. But then I'll have clients. I've had clients who are other coaches. People are wanting to start their coaching practices. They've not gotten clients. They've not gotten clients. But it's because they had some sort of belief within themselves where it's like they said they wanted it, but they didn't really want it. Like I've seen moms who are like, man, I want a successful coaching business. But they actually believed if they had a successful coaching business, they wouldn't be a good mom. Right? Like things like this. And we'll do a session and they release that. And suddenly emotionally, they're like, oh, I can accept clients. I can do a good job and it's going to be okay. And then they call me. They're like, I didn't even change anything. I didn't switch anything on my website. And 3 people called me. And I'm like, well, yeah, like those are people who are probably already thinking. It's like you just kind of like energetically put the open sign out there. And, you know, that does feel a little, you know, that gets into like, for me, what feels a little woo-woo. And I don't mean to be derogatory by that. But I do know that there is science behind it, as long as it's used the right way, so to speak. I don't know, did that make sense?
Absolutely made sense. And I would have to agree with you as well, because as I was just sharing with someone yesterday, how the Secret, they just came out with a new movie, like 2020 version on Amazon Prime, but it was like pretty corny. But anyways,
I watched the old one. It was interesting.
The example that they used in the movie was this little girl was saying that she wanted pizza. She wanted pizza. She wanted pizza. And mom was saying, no, we don't have money to buy pizza. Woe is me. We're broke. We're always going to be broke. And then 2 seconds later, the mom's boyfriend had ordered pizza to the house, and then there it shows up. So like, I just, for me, it's a little hard to just believe that I want pizza and then it just shows up at my door. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It just, like you said, missing the piece about action, but there is, as you said about science, and I never even heard that before. So that was really cool to hear about. That thoughts really do become things, and how your client was able to, like you said, put an I'm open sign. I'm open for business now. It's all about allowing yourself to be in a state of receiving, because if you're in the state where maybe she felt like she couldn't be that good mother, and she was in a state of I can't receive that, but then she transformed that to I'm receptive and now I'm open for business. And then seemingly in the matter of an hour, 2 hours, 24 hours, there was, her clients or whoever she was looking for in the first place. And that leads perfectly. That story leads perfectly to the next topic of, I want to start my coaching business, and I know that there's people listening to this and I need advice on this, and who better to learn from than you? So where does someone that thinks that they have some valuable experience start with their coaching journey? because this is a hot topic now. The industry is like worth what, like $7 billion. And I think in a couple of years, it's supposed to double, triple that. And
Totally.
so there's going to be a lot of people coming into the game that want to come into the game, but don't know how to come into the game.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
how do I get into the game?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a huge industry of people out there creating this, like, the only way you're going to be successful is if you pay me all this money and I teach you my secret formula. Like, yeah, it's a thing. So I will say, so I've had clients from day one. There's never been a day in my coaching practice when I've not had clients, and usually about as many as I can handle. And I say that the reason I've been so successful as a coach is because when I started coaching, I was not on social media. So what that means is I didn't see all the ads that everybody else is seeing. And basically nobody told me this was supposed to be so complicated. All I did was I messaged 5 people who had been asking me questions, people who I'm already helping for free. And I think that is huge. I'm like, go out there and help some people. Like, make sure you like helping the people. Like, go do some stuff. Like, talk to people, give them advice, see if they find it helpful. But I found 5 people who I was regularly talking to, who I thought it could help. And I said, hey, do you want to pay me money to do this on a more official basis every week? And they said yes. And I was a coach. And everything else I needed to figure out, I figured out as I went. Like, all the stuff out there is making it way too complicated. I'm like, there are 2 steps to becoming a coach, guys. Go find a human and offer to help them. That is it. Like, all this stuff about you need niche and you need freebie and you need funnel and you need all those things, you don't need any of them. I didn't have a website. I wasn't on social media. I did not have a funnel. I didn't have a freebie. I wasn't on Instagram. I didn't have any, and I didn't know that I needed them, is the cool part. I didn't know I needed an email list to be successful. So I went and I was successful without an email list. And I got one later because I thought maybe it'd be fun. My poor email list, they get emails from me when I feel like it. I don't really do much with it. But basically all that to say, there are so many ways that people can build a successful coaching business. There really are. There's not a right way. But I think the cool thing that I want people to know is that for as much as you're seeing ads about how to start your business this way, the people who you're seeing ads for are the people who are building their businesses using ads. And so you're going to get that method. But there is also this whole beautiful network of coaches who are building highly successful practices with no tech, off of word of mouth and direct referral. And that is what I did. I found those 5 people and I showed up and I served them. And I served them so powerfully that when their contract was up, they renewed with me and they said, can I give you my friend's number? And I coached them and their friends. And then I raised my rates. And then they said, this is fantastic. You're undercharging. Can I give your number out? Yep, you can. And then I just go places and I talk to people. I meet people in airports. I meet people in beaches. I meet on beaches. Like, I meet people wherever. I talk to them. I get really interested. I hear their stories. And if I think they're fascinating people who I think I could help, I say, hey, I do this thing called coaching. Would you like to hear about it? Would you like to experience it? And I don't try to tell them about it. All I do is invite people into a call. Because, guys, trying to explain coaching is so difficult. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, you're going to come in, you're going to be in one place, we're going to talk, something is going to shift, the entire world is going to look different, you're going to have this insight, you're going to feel better, and suddenly your whole future shifts. I mean, it sounds like magic. It doesn't sound like something you can explain to people. So I'm just like, hey, let's just hop on a call and talk. And I don't call it a discovery session or a whatever. Like, let's just be like humans and talk. And let me give you a taste of what I do. And then either people are interested or they're not. And I have to say, for the most part, I don't go find clients. I don't do a lot of selling. I go find people and I serve them. And then sometimes I forget that the point is to make money, because at the end of it, this happened to me recently. There was somebody on Instagram and they were just asking a lot of questions. And I was like, okay, girl, these are good questions. I hate typing. I'm so tired of looking at a screen. Can we just hop on a call so I can give you the answer verbally? So we hop on and like, I just coach her just like she's one of my clients. I just served her as powerfully as I would serve somebody who was paying me. And then at the end, I'm like, hey, great to meet you. Like, good luck with this. And she was like, wait a minute. How do I become a client? Can I like pay you? I was like, oh, right. That thing that I do. Yes, we can do that.
Hey, you mean my job? Yeah.
Right. Oh yeah, that thing that I
That.
do, because I forget, because honestly, my marketing of my coaching business is coaching.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. There's so much we can learn from that statement, just providing that value to people.
Yeah.
And I feel like the influence of social media, and especially the more of the like quote unquote sexy things we see, like all the money, cars, nice clothes, people going out to steakhouses, that influences others, and especially people around my age, and more younger people that are growing up with social media, that money is really the driving factor, because we
Mhm.
need everything that we see out
Mhm.
there to validate who we are and what we have. But I feel like you have such an old school mentality,
Mhm.
that new school should really adopt, of just provide the value in the first place. So now though, how do I blend the two and utilize things like, I know it's not your style, but you are also are on these platforms as well.
I am
Oh,
now. Yes, it's been
right.
very
You
fun.
you are now,
Yeah.
hence how we connected, which is great.
Yes.
So how can one that is growing up in a new technological environment utilize social media? Because this is big. Because a lot of the times the prospective clients are across the country. You
Mhm.
know what I'm saying? So how can one utilize what we have in front of us to kind of jumpstart our coaching and get those prospective clients? And also, does it have to be like super like weird in terms of like, hi, or not weird, let me put it this way, super salesman-y,
Oh yeah.
like hi, I'm use my case, I'll use myself an example. Hi, my name's Devin. Do you want help? And then leading to, yes, I if you want help, I have a program for 3 months, will cost you $2,000. Or can I go about it in a kind of normal service based way?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because I mean, if we show up, we're like, hey, I mean, everybody's being sold to right now. Like, and the amount of people, and everyone and their brother is like calling themselves a life coach. Like, there's a very low bar to entry. Everybody's selling something. And I think people are very tired of being sold to. And now, on the one hand, it's like, I'm not afraid of coming across a little salesy. Like, it's not a huge deal to me, but I don't think I usually do. And yeah, no, so I think the biggest way that I think of social media is it's just kind of like a party. Like, I think of it more like an event that I'm going to where I don't know all the people. Right. And we've all been to those events, which I used to hate, by the way, because I was like, I had so much social anxiety. I'm like, a whole bunch of people I've never met. I'm like, husband, stay very close to me, guide me around. Like, you talk to the people, just like be beside you. I was a very good wingman. Now you can't shut me up at all. But I'm like, social media is like this. It's like you're at a party and there's all these people and we don't know any of them. But can you meet people at a party? Yeah, but you don't go up and say like, "Hi, I'm Lorrie. I have a 3-month program. Would you like help?" That's weird. Like, we say, "Hi, I'm Lorrie." Like, like, what are you about? Like, what do you do? And just think about like how we talk to people at events that we don't know. We start conversations with them. And so when you go to a party and there's a bunch of people, we're gonna see a lot of them. Some of them, for whatever reason, we're gonna be drawn to have a conversation with. Some of those people we're going to have a conversation with, and pretty soon we're going to realize that was enough, and we're going to say bye, and we're going to go on to the other person. But if I go to an event with all these people, it never fails. I'm going to get into a deep conversation with a handful of people, right? Just with like a number of them who I resonate with. And then for those people at some point it might go to like, oh, I'm a life coach, like what do you do? That's so fascinating. Oh my goodness, I feel like I would love to learn more about that. Okay, well, let's set up something for next week. But if we use social media that way, it's like there's all these people out there, but it's like you can go meet people in a non-creepy, non-salesy way. And I think that we do need to meet them first, because not everybody are we going to resonate with, not everybody are we going to want to help. And I think that was the thing. Whenever I flipped the script from this like needy scarcity, I need clients, I'm trying to go find them, to first of all, I'm the expert, I have the thing that I'm offering, and I'm basically like interviewing you. Like, I'm talking to a person, I'm like, do I like you? Because again, my two criteria, I have to like you and I have to think I can help you. So like my very first thing is like, do I like you? Now again, I tend to like love all the humans, but some of them I'm like, you're just not my people, and that's okay. But I want to talk to somebody long enough to actually see do we resonate? Like, is there a connection? But even then, I don't launch with like, here's my program. I'm like, hey, this thing that you're talking about, like, I think I could help with this. Would you like some help with this? And that's just free. It's just like, we just hop on a call, and the same way I would help out a friend or somebody at a party or somebody wherever. Yeah, I just hop on to help them. And then towards the end, either by that point they've gone and looked at my profile and they know that I'm a coach, or at that point I might tell them, be like, hey, like, as we're talking, like, based on what you're sharing with me, you know, what I do for a living is this. And like, based on what you're telling me, this seems like something that might be helpful to you. Like, would you be interested in learning more about this? I just use permission language. I just am like a real person. So even though I'm on social media, to me, it's just a big party. And it's not this like sales tactic. I'm like, these are real people on the other side of these profiles. How do I get to know them? And I'm going to get to know them before I make an offer to them, or before I even invite them into a conversation. Because to me, otherwise, it's just weird.
Yeah, I think that's cool. That is cool. Instagram or social media is one big party. That's a great way to look at it. That just takes away the complexity of having to do all these ads and this, that, and the other thing. And it's just about just connecting with people, which is so simple, but I feel like yet so powerful. And how beautiful is that? Now, one last thing that I would have a question of doing in terms of getting clients and so forth is, yes, providing the free content, but yet the content is not being seen, because I see, and that's a lot of the reasons why people sponsor their ads and so forth, is
Yes.
because so it can start to get seen.
Mm-hmm.
So then if it's not getting seen, does one, and when I say I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about the audience in specific, and
Yes.
do I go approaching people, messaging them, or do I just keep providing content and hope that it resonates with somebody and they message me? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think most people are going to message us, because it's weird, because they don't know us. Like, I usually reach out to people first, unless it's a direct connect, referral kind of situation. But yeah, so as we look at content, now I post on social media. I genuinely at this point, like, I'm like, if I'm posting on social media, I kind of think of it as like, this is like my free act of service to the world, because there are people who need to hear what I have to say, who are never going to be able to pay me. And to me, posting on Instagram, posting free content is charity. That's it. Like, I don't think I've ever gotten a client from a social media post ever. And I don't try to. Clients are created within the context of conversations, and powerful conversations, and deep life-changing conversations. So the only reason I want to have anything on social media is because I want people, if I talk to them, kind of like you reached out to me the audience doesn't know this, but you reached out to me and was like, hey, I have this podcast, you want to be on it? And I'm kind of like, are you a real person? Are you creepy? Like, what are you about? And so it was great to be able to go to your social media. I'm like, okay, he has a real profile. It looks like he's in a relationship. Like, they have a house. Looks like a stable individual. Like, listen to some videos. Like, you're a real person. Okay. And then I'm, open to talk to you. So it's great to have social media so people can go and they can get a sense of like what we're about, and like, and if we're their sort of people, because otherwise it is kind of random and weird. But we have to look at like, what is the point, and why are we putting it out there, and what are we doing? Because we always want to take purposeful action, and we want that action to lead to something else, and we want to know how it works. And the truth is, I don't need 50,000 followers. Like, if you guys go to my, like, I don't know, at the time of this podcast, like, my Instagram followers, it's like 1,000 people, like maybe getting close to 2. I don't care how many followers I have. If I have 100 followers, but 50 of them are paying me, that's fantastic. You know what I mean? Like, I would rather have a very small number of people who care what I'm doing and are paying me money than have, 100,000 people who look at my content just so I can like feel some sort of sense of self-worth. I don't post on social media for that reason. I don't share content for that reason. If I'm sharing it, it's as an act of service to people. But if I'm trying to create a client, the better way, guys, if you're like, I need more clients, don't try to speak to the masses. find one person, go follow some hashtags, find a person, look at their profile, read their stories, go through all of their things, send them a genuinely thoughtful, personal message that shows that you looked at their stuff, you researched them, you cared about them. If you're going for something that's like in the corporate world, if you're going to talk to somebody who's done big things, know everything about them, like do your research. And I guarantee if you will reach out and connect deeply with one person a day, infinitely more powerful than just random content to the universe, 6 times a day that nobody's really listening to. People will start listening over time. So like keep showing up. And again, I think that's the other thing. Part of the reason that I make content and that I wrote emails and that I do any of that, part of it is for the people that can't pay me. And part of it is because if you guys are new to this, you need to practice your messaging. You need to practice what you're saying. You need to do it on repeat. You need to consistently put those things out there, where you can figure out your language and how do you talk and what is your message. And it's great practicing. But I still don't think for most of us, it's ever going to be as effective as one-on-one connection. But that comes down to what kind of a coaching business do you want? For me, I like working with, a smaller number of people on a deep level. I don't need, 1,000 people in a low priced membership. I'm like, nope, I want a handful of like fantastic clients. And that means I don't have to get 100,000 people's eyes on my content. I need to connect with one person a day deeply. But some of you may have dreams to do some other sort of thing where you really do need hundreds of thousands of eyeballs on things. Yeah, maybe consider ads. Like you can look at all those things. It just depends on what kind of a business you want to build, who you are as a person, what's in alignment for you.
Yeah, that's cool. Just breaking it down to that one conversation a day. That's a gem right there, Lorrie. That's really good. Now, I think that gives a nice, well-rounded view, how to get in, how to attract clients, how to maintain clients, and just the genuine, the general gist of, it seems to me, building relationships and maintaining relationships.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool right there too. And my last question for you, it's not anything to do with coaching, maybe actually to do with coaching, but not on a recommendations type of basis. But when you think of Lorrie on a grand scale and the contribution that you hope to make to society as in general, or to maybe just your clients and the legacy that you want to leave, what does that look like for Miss Lorrie Gray?
My goodness. Man, that is a big question. You should tell people that's the question you're going to ask them before they get to this part in the podcast. No, that's a good one. I'll have to think about it. So, as far as contribution, it is so interesting. I'm not sure what that would look like long-term in terms of legacy, but I know that as much as I coach on a lot of very specific things, if I think about who I am in the world and like what I do, I tell people, how do I say this? So people come to me a lot and they're confused. They're confused by their actions. They're confused by their results. They're confused by their life. There's a lot of like, I want to be someplace that I'm not sure how to get there. I don't know why I keep doing this thing. There's just a lot of like not understanding. And I think the biggest thing I always like to tell people, I'm like, I think it always makes sense. I think why we do what we do, I think where we are, where we're at, I think it always makes sense. But the reason is never that there's something wrong with you. And if anything, through my coaching, like for the most part, like even people right now, I'm like, you don't need coaching. You're fine. Because people come to me because they think there's something wrong with them. I'm like, and if, at the end of my life, if I could look back and be like, there were a bunch of people who thought that they were broken, who thought that there was something wrong with them, who thought that they were less than, and I helped shift that for one person to believe that they really were valuable and had worth just by existing, that would just be the thing. Like that would just, and when that happens, whenever I see a client get that, when they go from, like, I remember the day that when we walk through this and they have that moment when they realize that it's not true, that they actually are valuable, that they do have worth, that they aren't broken, and I see them get it. I tell you what, I'm not even a crier, and I cry every time. Like, that moment is really what it's all about for me, when people understand, like really understand their value. It's just everything. So the more I can do that, and, in the process, I think just bringing light, bringing hope, those are
Yeah,
things that
I
I
mean,
really enjoy.
for Lori, a woman that was put on a hot seat like that, that was pretty impressive. That was pretty impressive. No, seriously,
What's wrong with that?
that honestly sounded like a question you were prepared for, because that is really
Yes.
beautiful in the fact that you really say that once again. You want to be able for people to know that they are valuable in who they are. Am I
Yes.
correct in that? Yeah, that is something that and that's funny that you say that, because I was on here yesterday with another female, another amazing woman, and she told me, I asked her this question. Listen to this one. You thought the one I just said? Listen to this one. I said, imagine I, I made you the director of or the secretary of education in the United States, and you had the ability to go back to implement a specific program or some, curriculum to teach students starting in the 6th grade. What would that be? So I was, oh boy, let me start thinking here. And the thing that she came to was that she said, I would start to tell and teach and help these children understand the value that your own words have on who you think you are as a person.
Mm.
And just
Oh man.
that and as I thought about it, I was like, holy moly, that's so true. Because me back in 6th grade was a person who was like, I went home every day and cried in my pillow and said, God, why me? That's so funny that we were having that discussion, why not me versus why me, and how I was such that victim. Anyways, that was how I was. Now imagine if I was told from an early age to practice words that will enable you to love yourself, and you create your
Yes.
future. And it's just
Oh my
unbelievable
goodness.
that I feel like the younger we start, the more just the happier people will be, the more fulfilled people will be. And who
So
knows,
true.
maybe there wouldn't be a need for, I don't want to say coaches, but people would have a lot more figured out if we set up a curriculum in which, and maybe Lori, you are the pioneer of this, which this is how you live a fulfilled life. And there's no one answer to that, but that's why you have different minds that come together and bring ideas, instead of just let me learn how to do Excel, or let me do accounting. I didn't take
No.
any I didn't take any classes on how to find my passions or live a fulfilled life.
No, exactly. And that's the thing. And the amount of clients that I've talked to, and they say, why didn't anyone tell me this? Why didn't anyone teach me this? And it's part of why, like, we homeschool, and we consider our kids like emotional, like things like emotional literacy, emotional management, conflict resolution, positive affirmations, gratitude practices, all these things. We put those on par with math and history.
I love it.
um,
Yeah.
because I agree. I'm like, I think that, yeah. And I was sitting there like watching my daughter one day like try to like by hand like calculate the volume of a cone, and I'm like, when are you gonna use this? She's an artist. I'm like, for heaven's sakes. I'm like, but teaching her how to walk through anxiety, how to build herself up, how to walk through a mistake well. Yeah, I think that these sort of things, these emotional skills are very much lacking. See, I would have had a good answer to that question.
Lori, you put it together perfectly. That was seriously beautiful. And I didn't know that. Is that a big factor as to why you homeschool your children? Is that you feel like you can have that impact on them?
Oh, no, it's actually a little bit more practical than that. My eldest has an allergy, but it's to dairy products, but it's more like on the
Really?
level of peanuts to like airborne stuff, cross
Oh, wow.
contamination kind of things. So it was one of those things where like it just was not safe for her to be in a
Right.
public school system. Um, and so that was sort of the initial thing. But now, like now, even if that was gone, we would keep doing
Now
it.
you
And
see the,
like,
the true value in it.
oh my goodness, on all the levels. But yeah,
I've
so
never thought about
initially,
that. Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't initially for that, but it's been great because we are able to prioritize what we think is important, and we're able to adjust for so many things. But I do love it that like my kids are getting this emotional curriculum alongside history and math. And I think that yeah, my kids are able to they have skill sets and like time management things. Like my daughter, she decided she wanted to finish a book. She's writing an original novel and she wants it to be published before she's 16. I'm like, that's fantastic. So she immediately went through to like, you know what? She's like, what I probably need to do is work backwards. And I bet I'll just make a schedule and I'll commit to like doing like 1 hour of this every day so that I'm done like on time. And I'm like, oh my goodness. You
How
can tell
old is she?
Your mother's a life coach. She's 13, but this is when she was 12. Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm like, your mom's a life coach. But those are the kinds of, we work through those things as part of what we teach them. Right. And yeah, you can see the value of it. So,
well, they have a fabulous teacher, Lorrie. So
oh, you're the sweetest.
Thank you very much. This was an intriguing conversation. A lot of practical knowledge came out of this and things that I can apply in my own life personally. So I thank you for that. And for the audience that's listening, I know that you guys have a lot that you took away from this too, from such a strong, powerful woman like yourself, Lorrie. Seriously, this was a lot of practicality, and I know that your clients are lucky. And thank you for being here, and I hope we have some conversations in the future.
Oh, for sure. We're going to stay connected. This was my pleasure. It was so much fun to be here. This was a great conversation. So thanks for having me. Yeah. And all you listeners, you have to reach out. Like, again, I'm on social media, but I only use it for real conversation. So say hi, like
where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, I'm mostly on Instagram these days. I have a Facebook account that I never check. So yeah, find me on Instagram at Coach Lorrie Gray, and yeah, say hi to me. It'll be fun.